This is the Book of Dog. And as you've heard, it's a collection of 45 pieces. It traverses many genres. It's got essays, it's got photo features, it's got travelogues. All these stories are original. And with me are three of the contributors. So I'm actually going to jump straight into it and ask them about their early experiences with dogs, and then we're just going to open up this conversation. The one thing I did also want to add, and I'm sure Jerry is going to make this point repeatedly, is that all royalties go to animal welfare. So,
Woof!
Thank you. So Bulbul, should we start with you? Do you want to talk about your early experiences with dogs, and then talk a bit about your piece in the book?
Hello, lovely to be here in Bangalore. So I've always had a child since childhood, to say. And when I had my own home, then I had these street dogs. And my children to this day, who are adults now, say I love them much more than I did them. And, I spoke to them with this baby language, which I've never used with my own children. So I've always had dogs. My mother always had dogs. We had this very nasty Apso, who had his own dining table, chair. And if anybody went near that chair, we'd be bitten. And my mother would say, it's your fault. So we had scars all over, and the neighborhood used to think we're very odd people with bandages, with our own dog biting. So that's kind of a family I came from. And now I live in Himachal most of the time, in a very remote orchard. And we have these gaddi dogs, which are Himalayan sheep dogs. We got them from the shepherds who take their goats from the high mountains to the plains. And they have these very ferocious mountain dogs. And they're independent dogs, they're working dogs, they're not lap dogs like my Apso was. But while I'm there, I spend a couple of months, they become house dogs. And they beg, and they sit, and they eat biscuits. And the person who looks after the orchard says, I don't know if you all speak Hindi, most of you probably understand, says, ye ek mahina ke liye Angrez ban jate hain, because they're strong working dogs, and suddenly they're begging, and they're jumping, doing things. So they're very strong-minded, wonderful, loyal dogs. So that's my experience with dogs.
Thank you. Arunava? Okay, Jerry.
I never had a dog. This was because I think fundamentally I can see how much vulnerability comes with that kind of love. Because the love that you receive from a dog is so pure in a way, and so complete and so whole, that first you're always at the negative end. In the sense you cannot give that much love back, right? And every time you leave the house, there is the wrenching of the departure, and the joy of the return, and the terrible thing that, there is no match between our lifespan and the dog's lifespan. So that 14 or 15 years later, sometimes if you're lucky, 18 years later, there is a hole in your heart that will never be repaired. And many people have sequential dogs, and that's fine. I think it's wonderful. You have your dog that, you have dog one, and then, that dies, and someone brings a puppy along, and that puppy crawls into your lap, pees on you, and makes you her territory, makes you her entire pack, her world, and we are not averse to that. We immediately settle into that new love, right? And it is a new love. People talk of canine love as if it's one thing, but anyone who has known several dogs knows that each dog loves you differently, in as much as each child loves you differently. There's a complete difference between the love a gaddi dog will give you and the love a Lhasa Apso will give you. It's totally different. My last thing is that therefore, because we never had a dog, every dog was our dog, right? So when my sister and I go for our walks, we know every dog along the way. We carry treats for them. We carry, we carry water for them during all weather, because even in the rain especially, my poor streeties really suffer because they get all kinds of waterborne diseases. So clean water is sometimes a rarity. And we try to protect by giving a lot of positive affirmation to people who feed street dogs and street cats, because for some reason these people who feed street dogs and street cats are always targeted with brutality people suddenly start beating them up or for some strange, peculiar reason of their own. I mean, this is a country where we know the Buddha once said, to the hungry, anna is dharma, grain is jnana. Okay? So we know this. Gandhiji has said that, to the hungry, there is no teaching greater than food. We know this and yet we attack people who feed dogs. Last point. If you are thinking of getting a dog, go adopt one. Take an indie off the street. Give it a good life. But only if you are willing to incur the beautiful benefits, but also the great responsibility of taking a Jivatma into your family and giving it a happy place to be. A happy dog space. Woof!
In fact, actually coming back to your piece, Jerry, there's this line that I love where, so Jerry's piece is actually about an older dog teaching a young pup the ways of the world. This dog has actually lived his entire life in a kennel. And one of the lines and it's beautiful and it's poignant and it's heartbreaking also, because one of the lines the dog tells the younger pup is that we like people, it is our strength and our weakness. And that also brings me back to the work that you do with Welfare for Stray Dogs in Bombay.
I really don't see it as work, because what you get, like, I go once a week to walk some dogs. So I take the dogs out, and that's like taking a child out.
Yeah.
It's like taking, you watch, if I could replicate the curiosity with which a dog investigates the world, I would be a much finer writer. Because that's our strength, no? Jigyasa, curiosity. Like a dog can be distracted by a passing butterfly. We erase the passing butterfly because we are so focused and targeted on getting something done. Right? Most of our life, like today, I raced off to see a friend. I had breakfast with him, and then I raced back in here. Then I tried to... We are actually like ping pong balls or like billiards. We are just bouncing off walls trying to get stuff done. A dog knows how to be in the moment. It is in that moment of sniffing another dog's bum in which the dog is totally invested at that moment. It is there. If we could learn that from dogs, so I walk dogs, and then of course I just walk around petting the ones that look like they need petting, chatting about this little one that came from that. And then I fundraise. So now my rule is, if you want me to read your manuscript, I will, but make a donation to WSD, to Welfare of Stray Dogs, and I'll read your manuscript.
Arunava.
No, Hemali, you go first. Okay. Because Jerry spoke about being a serial human to dogs. So that's your life. You tell us about that.
So I actually, to be honest, I mentioned it in the introduction, I didn't grow up with dogs. And dogs came to my life fairly late. But once our first dog came into our life, Simba, it was transformative. I think he changed everything. Like Jerry said, it's a life-changing experience. It makes you see the world differently. And I think, so there was Simba, and then we had a few others after that. And there were lots of lessons to be learned along the way. I think what's interesting is we don't really talk about what dogs teach us, we're going to talk about the aspect of loss as well as we go along with this conversation. But I think the sheer joy of living life with a dog is indescribable. So yes, there is pain once like you're talking about sequential dogs or when you move on. But the way I see it, one dog does not replace the other. You just are so used to that very special kind of love that you just open your heart and then that's it. It's a one-way street. Once you get a dog, you don't go back. It's like the mafia, like someone said. Once you're in, you're in. But I think also, sorry? Yeah, the timer isn't working. I think also, one of the lessons that I learned, and one of the most important lessons that I learned along the way was really, like Jerry said, not to buy dogs. I think not get dogs from breeders. So now we make sure that many dogs we have are actually adopted dogs looking for another home. But yeah. Moving on to you, your as I would say, your finest work of translation. Arunava has actually co-authored a piece with his dog Tingmo. And they're delightful. It's a haiku in the day of, a day in Tingmo's life. And do you want to tell us a bit about that? Because Tingmo seems, I mean, I see all of you posting photos. He seems to be just such an integral part of your life, which is lovely to see. But was he your first dog? Is he your first dog?
Well, Tingmo is the first dog who's lived with me 24/7. But there have been many dogs in my life. I think the first story I ever heard anyone tell was of dogs in the family. My grandfather's brother used to have dogs, and he used to have dogs with very elaborate names. So for example, when I was young, there was a dachshund whom we knew as Robin, but he was very upset because we called him Robin, because apparently his name was Hero of Daminus. And I tried to reason with my great uncle that you cannot call somebody Hero of Daminus, come here, Hero of Daminus, do you want a biscuit? But no. So yeah, dogs always. But Tingmo came and pretty much took over within about 6 hours. He came when he was 6 weeks old, and we did not know the first thing about how to live with a dog. He was fed 6 times in the first 24 hours. And he assumed that was what life was like, that he was going to be fed 6 times a day. So every 3 hours he would, yes, where's my food? Many table manners that we've learned, among the table manners at home, one of the things is never to let your elbows stray from your body when you're eating. Because if you do, if your elbows stray, there's a head
Attack.
in your armpit, sticking right in there. So he's a golden retriever. He's large not by the standards of golden retrievers, but by the standards of most dogs you see around. So the ironic thing is that the people in the neighborhood, would-be thieves or couriers or Swiggy and Zomato people are terrified of him. They're terrified and they refuse to deliver anything at home. Even the thieves have laid off. Once they tried to steal an inverter, then Tingmo sort of said hello, and that was it. That was the last attempt. But what they don't know is that he will go off with any of them. Far from they're being scared of him, he wants to, anyone who can come home and take him away. He is happy with everyone. He's happiest when he's with human beings.
Show him a biscuit and that's it.
Yeah, and if he can get out, then why stay at home? So he will go. He's found the door open and he's gone out a couple of times. Fortunately, he's famous in the neighborhood, so they brought him back, and we've been ashamed to say that we let him out. But yeah.
I think with that background, you must read a bit of the haiku, if that's okay.
Yeah, okay. Someone else can speak in the meantime while I look at it.
Yes, sure.
I'll take that up about names. So this famous Apso, the biting Apso that I had, his name was Chia, which I thought, quite a nice Chinese sounding name. And my late husband was a journalist. So he didn't tell me that he invited this gentleman from the Chinese embassy. And Shia was a little puppy. And the children were very excited. Shia, Shia, everybody was shouting. And every time he said Shia, this Chinese gentleman would stand up and bow. And then to our horror, we realized that he had a long name, and one of the middle name was Shia. So then it got very embarrassing, and we didn't know how to get Shia out of the room, because Shia was also very excited with all the attention. Anyway, finally we sat down at the dining table, and Shia, because she was trained by my mother, had a place at the dining table next to the Chinese gentleman. So anyway, it was quite you can imagine how angry my husband was in this situation, because it was supposed to be a serious meeting between the press and the Chinese gentleman. So when he went back, he told everybody that in India, there is a very good tradition, dog sitting with family at table. So, somewhere in China, it's written that all Indian families entertain their dogs with them. So that was the story of Shia.
Yeah, in fact, there are quite a few funny stories around names of dogs in the book. So Cyrus Procha has done these 4 commandments for dog parents. And one of the things he says is, please make sure that if you name your dog, the name is pronounceable and understandable, because a lot is lost in translation. And Shobha Day talks about her dog called Gong Li, named after a Chinese actress, and very elegant, very sophisticated dog, wonderful, So one day Shobha goes out, and they don't know where Gong Li is, and the guards and all are saying, "Kisko dhund rahe? Acha, Ganguly." So yeah, do you want to read?
Yeah, okay. In fact, we were told that Tingmo was a terrible choice for a name because it rhymes with no, and Tingmo can no longer tell no apart from Tingmo. So no is lost from his life. You can't say no to him. There's a bit about his escape. It's all perfect haikus. He is very scrupulous about getting the syllables right. I hate this collar. If I make my neck thinner, I can wriggle out. I did it. I'm free. Make a run for it right now. Bald guy will chase me. I know what he thinks, that I might get lost somewhere. I'll let him panic. Look, I'm at the gates. This is where I should slow down. Nonsense. I will run. Grr. Some guy in green has grabbed me and won't let go. Now they'll take me back.
So since we are at a literature festival, I'm going to ask this. One of the pieces in the book is by Mahesh Rao, and he talks very sensitively about how he couldn't have a dog growing up because of a medical condition in the family. And so his companions were really dogs from literature or dogs from cinema. So it was Scooby-Doo, or it was, he talks about how he sought companionship because he was so keen to get a dog. So growing up, any of the dogs that actually particularly resonated with you? I mean, I remember I used to love reading the antics of Snowy or Snoopy. These two were my favorites. What about you? What about dogs in popular culture? Any dogs you particularly feel attached to?
Well, we had so many dogs at home, so I really didn't have a chance to go out. But I remember this lady used to work for us, and she only liked Alsatians, and I always had stray dogs, except for this lone app. So she says to me one day, "Aap tiger kutta kyun nahi late?" So I didn't know what it was, and she showed me a photograph in a Hindi film with this dog. I forget the name. It must have been Rocky something. It was this huge Alsatian called Tiger. So that's the only memory I have, Tiger Kutta.
I have an Alsatian story.
Please tell us.
My cousin, my senior cousin, was in the customs, and he married an Anglo-Chinese woman who hated everyone in the family. And we hated her back generally, but she didn't mind me so much because I was treated as kind of like of no significance. So once I went and visited her, and her husband came to receive me at the station, and his entire arm was bandaged. So I said, "What happened?" So he said, "Oh, nothing. I just got bitten." So I thought, bitten? So what she had done was rescued an Alsatian that was badly traumatized while he was away on tour. She'd calmed him down to the point at which he was all right. He was dealing with the other 6 dogs in the house, with the canary, with the parrots, none of which were in cages. If they shat on your head, you're just supposed to clean it off and wash your fingers a little. Lucky for you, just get on with your life. Please don't worry about it. If the dog was menstruating on the bed, then you were just supposed to say, "That's a little blood," and you're supposed to get on with it. So Eddie came home late in the night, and as was his wont, took off his clothes and climbed upon his wife. Whereupon the Alsatian woke up and just went for him, dug his fangs into Eddie's bicep and ripped the bicep off. Okay.
Oh my God.
At which point, Janet, which is the Anglo-Chinese woman, started slapping Eddie for not having the good sense to announce himself, to make friends with the dog, and then to claim his, husbandly rights. Okay.
But Jerry, who gave you these details?
Janet was Anglo-Chinese and had absolutely no filters at all.
Clearly.
Yeah. And about a year later, the Alsatian had actually really serious mental problems, in the sense that, he was so tense that he could only sleep if you held him tight.
Oh my God.
Like you had to really hold him tight so that he felt like he was snuggling.
But only Janet could hold
And
him.
only Janice could hold him, yeah. So, and she could do it about 2 or 3 hours. So he was living at the end of his nerves. So finally his heart just gave way, and then she had to bury him. And she fought the Anglican church, her church, to bury her dog in the family grave.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Family grave.
Arunava, you want to talk about dogs?
My
and-
dogs are all buried under this old house, which we lived in for 40 years. So there were about 6 dogs buried. And my son recently, as it is now, young people pull down the old houses and build flats. And he says, Mom, it's a graveyard.
Pet cemetery.
So I told him, you jolly well do prayers
That
for
was
all
very
my dogs.
wrong.
He was worried that I'd murdered a lot of people and, quietly been burying them underground. But I had it all sort of a little puja done, and then they started the new house.
So I've just been told we have 5 minutes. I didn't realize the time
Now
is
it's
actually
3.
flown. Oh, 3.
Talking so much.
Should we just take 2 questions? Is that okay? So we'll take one from this side and one from that side. Yeah.
My question might sound really silly, but ever since after reading this book, I have found myself attached more towards dogs. And I have only a few in my native and none in my house because my parents won't allow me to get any. My question is, how do I convince them to get it?
Okay. I tell you what,
Your parents are here?
Thankfully, no.
No.
We might want to turn off the recording for this part of the conversation.
there is not one human being who can actually resist the luscious seductions of a loving puppy. Get a small puppy and put it in your mother's lap. And say, just look after this for 5 minutes, I'm coming back. 5 minutes is all it'll take.
That's right. He's right.
Yeah, and it'll be done and dusted. By the time you come back in, your mother will not give the puppy back to you. And your puppy will have developed a name like Lalo or Gucci Gucci or some completely nonsense name like that.